right, 2 Corinthians chapter number 2 in your Bibles. 2 Corinthians chapter 2. St. Corinthians 2. Looking forward to Sunday school being back going again. I think it's going to be good for everybody. Back in their classes and doing events on the side with their Sunday school group, making it kind of a little church group within the church group and ministering. And I think it's going to be really good to get back to doing that. 2 Corinthians chapter number 2. And look with me in verse number, look at verse number 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse number 12. And I'm going to read you a couple of verses here, then flip over to chapter 7, read you a couple of verses there, and then give you the context of what's going on here and make some application for you. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse number 12, it says, "Furthermore, when I came to Troas to preach Christ's gospel, and a door was opened unto me of the Lord, I had no rest in my spirit, because I found not Titus my brother, but taking my leave of them, I went from thence into Macedonia." Now, so I want you to get this, as I titled the Missing the Open Door. And I almost preached this last Sunday, and at the last minute I felt like the Lord changed it to Psalm 107, which I think that was the right sermon. And but when you look at this one, this is a really interesting spot. Here he is traveling, and if you know kind of that area, Corinth is the church he's writing. It's that bottom part of a little leg, and he's coming up and he hits Troas. He's going to go from Troas over into Macedonia and then come down into Corinth. And I could have put a map up there for you, but that's kind of the idea that he's traveling, he's going there. And he gets to Troas, and when he gets to Troas, there's a door open. There's an opportunity for him to preach the gospel and to preach Christ's gospel. And the door open, and you would think, well, this is. I mean, Paul was not shy about open doors. I mean, he'd jump through a door, he'd kick a door open. He wanted open doors, but here's an open door, and something is so stirred up in his spirit that he leaves that place where the door is open and travels to Macedonia looking for Titus. I want you to look over at 2 Corinthians chapter number 7. I'm going to show you this and then kind of connect all this together for you. 2 Corinthians chapter 7, look at verse number 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse number 5. He says, "For when we were come into Macedonia," so now he's made it from Troas, where he had no rest in his spirit. He's made it into Macedonia. He says, "When we were come into Macedonia, our flesh had no rest, but we were troubled on every side. Without were fightings, within were fears." So he had some issues with no rest in his spirit first in Troas, and eventually gets over to Macedonia, where he thought, I need to get to Macedonia to find Titus. When he gets there, things aren't any better over there. I mean, there's still fightings, there's still fears, still things going on in Macedonia, and now he has no rest in his flesh. And let me make a connection there for you that is not a super deep connection, but it's something I saw and I thought this was pretty interesting, is that when you have no peace inside, it starts to affect no peace outside. And so when it starts off, I had no rest in my spirit, I had no rest inside, it starts to affect everything outwardly as well. You start having outside ailings when you have inside issues. And that is a very true statement. And so he says, when I was over here, I had problems inside of some no rest in my spirit. When I finally made it over to this side, there's no rest in my flesh. And so there's some issues that are going on in his life. And so he says that we're without, so outside of him, all around him were fightings, inside of him were fears. Verse 6, "Nevertheless, God, that comforteth those that are cast down, comforted us by the coming of Titus." So remember, he couldn't find any rest, and he didn't even stay there for an open door when he was in Troas, because he didn't find Titus there. So now he's looking for Titus. He needs to find Titus. And he gets to Macedonia. When he gets to Macedonia, there he finds him. Now, nothing's changed. There's still issues that are going on there. Now it's even progressed to there's a uneasiness in his flesh now, not just the spirit. And he's still fightings and fears going on. But now he's finally running into Titus. And you might think, well, he just wanted a fellowship with somebody. He just wanted to meet his good friend. It's more than that. I'm sure it has something to do with Titus. But it even goes further. It says this, "And not by his coming only." So it wasn't just him showing up, but by the consolation wherewith he was comforted in you. Now watch what he says. "When he told us your earnest desire, your mourning, your fervent mind towards me, so that I rejoice the more." This is what he said. And here's the context of what's going on. "For though I made you sorry with a letter." The letter that he wrote was 1 Corinthians. He wrote him a letter, and he was pretty rough in 1 Corinthians. He started off talking about how, you know what, I've heard from Chloe. I always thought that was funny. He says, the household of Chloe has reported to me that there is contentions among you. And if I was to read that letter out to the church and said, hey, it's reported to me by Gary that there's problems over in this family and this family, everybody would be like, Gary, what did you tell the preacher? But he says, it's reported to me from Chloe that there's contentions, there's problems. So he starts off with, hey, you're divided over all this stuff. He talks about their wisdom, their worldly wisdom versus godly wisdom in chapter 2. He goes into the fact that they're divided again in chapter 3. He goes into all these different little subjects. In chapter 5, he's talking about there's people that are committing such gross, open, immoral sins within the group that not even the Gentiles even talk about the stuff that you've got going on in the church. Chapter 6, people are going to court against each other and wanting to sue each other. Chapter 7 is another one that has to do with immorality. 8, 9, and 10, he's having to deal with people saying, well, I've got liberty, I can do whatever I want to do, but you're causing other people to stumble and fall in your liberties. It gets to chapter number 11, talks about the fact that they can't deal with authority in their life, and they're having issues with that. And then they have an issue with the Lord's Supper. And he's writing all this, and at the end of chapter 11, he says, now, look, there's more things that you've got problems with, and the rest of it I'll fix when I get there. Really, wait a minute. You just wrote 11 chapters of how sorry we are, and then you said, when I get there, I'll tell you more? I mean, my goodness, I'm hoping you never show up. 12 and 13 and 14 are talking about spiritual gifts and how they were using their spiritual gifts inappropriately and causing problems within the church. And you've got all these issues. Chapter 15, somebody has slipped into the church and has taught false doctrine about the resurrection. And so you've got all of this stuff happening, and he's wrote a hard letter to them. And to think about it for a minute, he's not sure how they've responded. He doesn't know if, they don't have emails and text messages and Facebook and blogs and all this stuff. They don't have that. And so he's wrote a letter. He's sent it to them. He's rebuked them pretty heavily. And now he's supposed to be making his trip back around there. He's in Troas. He's going to get up to Macedonia and then go back down to Corinth. And he's sent Titus ahead to find out, Titus, go tell me if when I get there, they're going to be stoning me. When I get there, they're going to be happy. What is going to happen here? And so when he gets to Troas, I want you to think about it. I'm setting this up just what it says. When he gets to Troas, he knows he's supposed to preach there. And there's a door open for him to preach. But he's so stirred up about, I wonder how Corinth is doing. And where's Titus? I need to hear from him how they're doing. That he doesn't even step into the open door that's right in front of him. And he leaves there and travels to Macedonia, hoping he'll run into Titus there. And at first he really doesn't. He's still having fightings and fears. And he finally reaches Macedonia. He finally reaches Titus. And Titus says to him this, hey, everything's great. Everything's wonderful. No problems at all. In fact, he goes in chapter 7, they repented. They love you. They're getting everything right. And man, it's revivals going on down at the church house in Corinth. It's great. Now, here's the point I want you to get. He missed the thing God had for him to do in the place he was at while he was worried about something that was coming down the road. Now, if you get nothing else, there's your message. You miss the things that are right in front of you while you're focused there. And the open doors and the possibilities and the thing God wants to do, you miss it and it passes you by. And you leave and you go to do something else and you miss all the opportunities. I want to look at, from the verses, what it says are the three things that I think would have contributed to him and I think contribute to you. Let's look at those right here. In chapter number 7, two things he mentions right here in this verse 5. He says, without our fightings within our fears. The first one I want you to see is fightings. Now, he had fightings. He had issues that were going on, and I would like to take the time to go through a lot of this, but I'm not going to spend a great deal of time. I'm going to narrate some of it for you, but you can go back and find it. I'll give you the addresses where you can find it, but you can go back and find it. Just for time's sake, I'm not going to go through dissecting it, but here's the issue. When he starts off in chapter 1, think about fightings and issues you're going to run into. He starts off in chapter 1. He starts talking about what our sister talked about today with comforts. As you go through tribulation, you comfort others that are going through tribulation. And then Paul starts saying, I would not have you ignorant, brethren, of the trouble that came to us in Asia, how they were pressed above measure, out of measure, above strength, even so much that we despaired even of life. He talks about the fact that he had the sentence of death upon us, so much so, he said, that we could not even trust in our own selves, but in the God that raises the dead. You understand what he just said? It means I'm going to die, and my only hope, I can't hope in some kind of ruler, I can't hope in my friends, can't hope in myself. The only hope I've got at this point is I know the Scriptures, and it says that I will resurrect someday. That's all he's got left to hold on to. And so he's got fightings, he's got those things going on, he's got problems that are going on in the church. Not only that, there's false people that have slipped into that church with this turmoil that's going on, false people, and they're saying stuff about Paul. You've never probably spent any time looking at this. In fact, Levi called me this week and he's like, can you give me the context of 2 Corinthians chapter 12? Most people miss the context of the second half of Corinthians, but chapter 10 through 13 is Paul making a defense about himself of people that are making accusations about him. We always talk about the weapons of our warfare are not carnal but mighty through to God, pulling down the strongholds. We can make a great application there, but when you actually go back and look, it's the fact that there are people in that church that's saying Paul is weak and Paul is fleshly, and Paul is saying this in a really bold way. You think I'm weak and you think I'm fleshly, but the weapons that I have are not fleshly. They're mighty through God. He does that throughout that whole thing. When you get to chapter 11, he's having the same issues. They're saying, I'm weak. And they're saying things about me. In chapter 10, they say stuff about, well, his words are contemptible. And if you've seen him lately, he looks pretty weak. They're making all these arguments about him. So not only has he got fightings that are going on with people trying to kill him outside, he's even got false brethren within the church saying bad things about him and trying to run him down within the church. He's got issues. He's got things. In chapter 4, he says the God of this world is trying to blind the eyes of people so they won't see, and his job is to get the gospel to him. So not only is he having physical ailments and problems that are going on and people are trying to kill him, not only has he got false people around him, but he's actually got Satan that he's fighting against. I mean, that's pretty bad. And in chapter 11, the workers of Satan are what he calls the people that are causing the major problems. Now think about all this. Listen to me for a minute and think about this. Fightings are happening all around him. And let me say something about fightings. They're there to cause you problems, to distract you from the thing God has given you to do. And you can get so easily distracted on all the things going on around you to the point that you miss the open doors that are right in front of you. I think there's too many of us in our circles, we spend too much time fighting the wrong fightings that are out there instead of fighting the good fight of faith, Paul said. We spend our time fighting people, and folks, listen, it's not about fighting people, and we spend our time fighting Facebook and fighting politics, and listen, if I was the devil, I would get you involved in trying to fight every body you can fight, every church you can fight, every Facebook thing you can fight, every politic thing you can fight, as long as I kept you from fighting the good fight of faith. As long as I can keep you from seeing the effectual door that's open of, what do you say, preaching Christ's gospel. If I can get you to throw a rock at somebody instead of giving them the gospel, well, then I've won. And so we spend our time fighting the wrong fight. So let me say, there are things that are stopping you. Now, you just get whatever point you can get and grab onto it this morning. If there is something that's got your focus, there's a fight, there's something that's got your focus, instead of your focus being on the great, effectual, open door that God's got right in front of you, then you've got your focus on the wrong thing. And let me say this, fightings are robbing us of our opportunities to serve God. The second one he mentions, he says, without our fightings, within are what? Now, this is what's interesting to me. Paul is the very same guy that in 2 Timothy chapter number 1 and verse number 7, he said, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power of love and of sound mind. I don't think Paul was scared of people and things. I don't think that was the case. But I do find it interesting that he uses the word fear there. I find it also in chapter 11, if you want to turn over there, he says this in verse number 1, would to God you would bear with me a little of my folly, and indeed bear with me. Watch what he says, for I am jealous over you. He's jealous for the church at Corinth with a godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. And he's saying, you church, I want you to be able to stand. Think about the love He's got for these people. I want you to be able to stand before Christ in such a way that you can stand before Him with a clear conscience, that you've lived wholly for Him and not for anything else. He wants them to go there pure and right before God. Watch verse number 3, the first part of it. But I what? Fear. Lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. Here's what he's saying. His fear was not in, I'm scared that somebody's going to kill me, or I'm scared that they're going to stone me in the next town. Paul didn't have a problem with that kind of fear. I mean, when they stoned him in Lystra, he got up. They thought he was dead. He got back up and went back into town. That's not a fraidy cat. He's not scared that way. But you know what he does have a fear about? I want you to get it. He feared the unknown when it came to people he loved. He feared what might happen to the people that my heart is connected to, the labor I have for them. You know, he says the same things in Galatia. When he's talking to the church at Galatians, he talks to them and says, look, I'm afraid of you, lest I've bestowed this labor of mine in vain, that somebody has come in and taught you something wrong and taught you something different. He says, who did hinder you that you should not obey the truth? And so people are trying to twist from him something that he loves, something that he's hoping would be good for the future. And let me say something to you, make an application for you. He says fightings are causing problems, fears inside are causing problems. Don't get your focus on the fighting because you'll rob you of your opportunity, but don't get your focus on fears. It'll rob you of your opportunities. Let me make a couple of statements here for you that I think will be good. One of the greatest obstacles we have to living by faith and walking through the open doors God puts in our life is fear. Fear. It can take on different looks, and some of you need to clue in right here. This is where you need to start looking and listening real close right here. It takes on different looks. One of them is worry. Fear may look like, you say, well, I'm not fearful, but I am a worrywart. Same type of thing. And worry is one of them. Now, I found this definition a long time ago of the word worry. You know that worry is actually a German hunting word? I don't know if anybody ever known that before. Anybody ever heard that before? It's a German hunting word. Everybody know that? Doesn't matter. I can make it up and just say whatever I want to say then. You don't know. It's a German hunting word. All right, now here's what it means. It means that they would take the dogs out to go like a fox hunt or something, and they would go worry the prey. That's what they would call it, worrying the prey. And what the dogs would do is the dogs would go out and chase down the fox or whatever the prey was, and they would bark and chase them and bark and chase them from here to there to here to there. You know what their job was? To tire out the prey to where eventually the prey would fall over, gasping for air, and the dog could grab them by the throat, hold them down, so that the hunter could come along and eventually put them out and take them. There's an amen. So this is what I'm trying to get you to see. You know what the devil's trying to do and what you're allowing to happen in your life? You're allowing something to hound you and bark about, I'm worried about this or I'm worried about that. You're allowing those things to bark and nag you until it wears you out, where he says, I had no rest in my spirit or in my flesh. How do you get that way? Worrying will do that to you. It may look like anxiety. You see, what do you worry about? Well, you can worry about, listen, what did he say he worried about? It wasn't about the loss of his life. He was worrying about things that he labored in and things that he loved. So what do you worry about? You worry about things that you labor in and things you love. You worry about your kids. You worry about losing your job because that's not because of my position, but because how am I going to provide for my family? You worry about finances and what's going to happen is there going to be a recession? Well, this group's saying there is. This group's saying there isn't. This group's doing this. This group's doing that. I don't even know what to believe anymore. You worry. You know what you do? You worry to the point that you miss seeing God's open doors He's got right in front of you to do something great for the cause of Christ. It takes the form of anxiety. You say, what could you be anxious about? Well, you can be anxious about a lot of things. There's some of you in this church right now, and you're saying, this is the first time to be in this church. You know there's a level of anxiety sometimes that goes along with that. Am I going to be received? Are they going to say something that they said the last church that really got me messed up? And, some people have all kinds of different anxiety levels that go on in their life. And some of you say, well, I just, bless God, you're to get over the anxiety. Well, maybe you do better with it than some people do. But there's anxiety. And anxiety is about starting a church, about going to a church, about a new job, about a new school. Will they like me? Will they accept me? Will they receive me? Starting school back up again. Some of you young people are getting ready to start school back up. I remember those days. It's a long time ago. They're fading, but I remember those days. Some of you go to private school and you don't have to worry about this, but you're like, did I get the right clothes? Am I going to look right? They're going to think right. You say, well, you shouldn't think that way. You can tell them you shouldn't think that way, but they do think that way. You say, so what does that do? Well, you get anxiety about it, and you get so fearful about the unknowns of what it's going to be like that you miss the opportunity to either make a friend or influence somebody's life or even be a gospel witness. It can look like despair, worry, anxiety, despair. I don't know if anybody else does. Don't raise your hand because people around you might not know this about you, but some of you may have like an inner voice that talks to you and says weird things to you. Don't even nod your head. Don't even say anything. But you may have something inside that's going like, it's not going to work out. It's never going to work. They're not going to like you. Some of you may deal with that. I deal with that sometimes. I know right now you're thinking, next church. No, I deal with that sometimes. And you'll have things that'll take, listen now, and you'll get so focused on that talk that you miss right in front of you, there's an opportunity for you to be something. The open door. How did he miss the open door? How did Paul, of all people, miss the open door that was right in front of him? Fightings and fears. You missed the open doors. I found this, doing some research on this. In 2008, a neuroscientist conducted a study on how the human mind reacts to fear. That was very interesting. He said this, in the article in the New York Times, this doctor said, the most concrete things that neuroscience tells us is that when the fear system of the brain is active, the exploratory activity and risk-taking part is turned off. Now, that just sounds like a lot of extra words for saying when you're fearful, it's harder for you to take steps of faith. Can I tell you that there are people in the Bible that opened doors? Like Noah was an open door for the ark and for his family. And I'm sure that there was probably some anxiety about that, some fear about that. But he had to not look at the fear and he had to look at the faith. Abraham, leaving where he was from and going to a place he didn't know, he would have to overlook the fear and have to step by faith. Moses, going in and leading the people out, would have to overlook the fear and walk by faith. Joshua, taking people through Jericho, would have to overlook the fear and walk by faith. And so on and so forth. In Hebrews chapter 11 are people that would have to not let fear stop them from the open doors of faith. I found this quote and I thought it was interesting. Fear stops us from taking risks. But here's the thing. If you don't go out on a limb, you never find the best fruit. Fear hinders you from focusing on your faith opportunities, the open doors. You realize that when Israel was being taken to the promised land to walk into the land that flows with milk and honey and grapes, and huge grapes, I imagine them being the size of basketballs and all this type of stuff that they've got. And you realize when they got there, they sent the spies in and majority of them came back and said, we be not able. Why? Because there's giants over there. Yeah, but you're a group of giant killers. That's who you are. Could you understand? Listen now, an open door of a better life, an open door of houses you didn't build, of vineyards you didn't plant, an open door where God just, it says, blow a trumpet and walls fall down. There's an open door of great possibilities right in front of you, but you miss all of it because of your fear. Goliath is standing on the other side of a hillside one day and saying, I defy all the armies of the living God. And everybody, it says this. You go back and read in 1 Samuel chapter 16 and 17. You go back and look at it. You know what they all are paralyzed with fear. And David says, is there not a cause? God was with me when I would slay the bear and the lion. This uncircumcised Philistine to be like one of them. I'm telling you, you're missing the opportunities of the open door because of sometimes fightings and sometimes fears. Oh, this is pretty interesting. When we fear death, we stop living. When we fear a broken heart, we stop loving. You say, but you haven't understood what I've been through. I know. I understand some of you have been through a lot of stuff. But when you stop When you start living in the fear of somebody hurting you, you never open yourself up to the good thing that God does have for you. Yesterday, I thought about giving this illustration or not, but yesterday, I wasn't sure if this is a message I was going to preach up until yesterday, but then it kind of sunk in yesterday. And we went to a visitation up here at 10:30, and we're going to go out and tell people about Jesus. It's an open door, every Saturday morning at 10:30, open door to give Christ's gospel. And it was a good number that was there, and it was a blessing. We could always use more. It was a good number that was there. But something very interesting happened this Saturday morning. Miss Martha and Maxie came in to go visiting. Now, if you know anything about what's the story, she has cancer, and they're going through chemotherapy treatments right now. If you ever know anybody that has cancer, well, it's pretty debilitating. You know anybody that has cancer and they're going through chemotherapy treatments, now that'll knock you completely flat out. And I looked up and I thought, what are you doing here? She said, I want to just at least go maybe knock on one door and tell at least one person about Jesus today. I thought, my goodness. There's some of us, and I'm not trying to shame you, I'm just saying this. There's some of us that are healthy and have we've got complete opportunities, and we will not do anything to try to tell somebody about Christ. And this woman is sick, very sick. And her desire for a Saturday morning is, I just want to tell one person about Jesus. And I thought to myself, this kind of solidified, this is the message. I thought there was an open door. And believe me when I tell you this, I told her, don't knock on more than one door. Get out of the heat and go back home. Here's the thing. There was an open door in front of her, and she would not let sickness or fear stop her from trying to go through the door. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should do that exactly that way. In fact, I would rather her stay home and phone in a call to somebody. I really would. I'd rather just take care of yourself. But for the rest of us, what are we letting stop us from trying to be a gospel witness? The last one I want you to see is, I think it doesn't use the word, but I think you can apply it very easily, is we allow our frustrations to rob us from opportunities. When he got to Troas, you know what he thought? Titus will be here. Start looking around for him. And he didn't show, look now, let's listen real close, because some of you, this is going to be the point you need. What I thought was going to happen did not happen, where I thought it was going to happen, and when I thought it was going to happen. And you can get sideways that the thing I thought would happen, how I thought it would happen, and when I thought it would happen, it didn't happen, and we get frustrated. And we let our frustration stop us. So we get so focused on the frustration, we lose focus on the great thing God is doing right in front of us right now. Now, if I think about Paul, I think of this. This is my own estimation of Paul. Fightings never stopped him. Fears weren't stopping him. But when you put a combination of fightings, fear, and the frustration, it stopped him from walking through an open door. And so it may not be one thing that you're dealing with. It may be two things or three things you're dealing with, and all those things together have now got you to where you say, well, I'm doing pretty good with the fightings. I'm doing pretty good with the fears of the unknown. But now I've got a frustration in my life. Well, 3 strikes, I'm out. I just don't know if I can do it anymore. Let me give you a couple of verses. Proverbs 13:12. Now remember that verse. Proverbs 13:12, it says this: hope deferred maketh the heart sick, but when the desire cometh, it is a tree of life. So you're saying, I hope that it's going to happen. When I get to Troas, I hope I'm going to see him. Well, it wasn't there. You know what has happened? Your heart gets sick. Let me give you a second verse. Ecclesiastes 7:8. Remember that verse. Ecclesiastes 7:8. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. You know why the proud in spirit, when he's talking about the context of this, the proud in spirit is the one that says, well, it wasn't on my time frame. God, what are you doing? What is everybody else doing? It's a sense of pride that it has to be on your time frame and on your plan. The patient in spirit's better. Better is the end of the thing than the beginning. You know what he had? No vision and no rest. Why? Because of fightings, fears, and frustrations. Now here's what I want you to consider. I gave it to you at the very beginning. Here it is. Did he have anything to fear? Did he have anything to be frustrated about? Why? Because when he was, listen now, real close. When he was standing in Troas, just a short boat ride across, is the answer he's looking for. See, you're in your Troas right now of your life, and you're frustrated, and you're angry, and you can't figure out how come it's not working out. But I'm telling you that if you quit or you miss all the opportunities God's got right here while you're focused on Macedonia, you miss everything. But God's already taken care of it. It's just ahead. And you miss out. You say, well, I'm so glad I got to my Macedonia. I got the blessing. I'm so glad I got here. Yes, but you missed the good thing you could have also got in Troas. I told Stacy last night, I said, I got this thought. And I hate using ourselves as an example. It feels like it's about every sermon. But the issue is, for 20 years, we're trying to have a child, and you cannot have a child. I took somebody the other day, have somebody that's, I don't know their standing with the Lord, but I've met them along the way, and they wanted to learn how to fish in a kayak, and so they contacted me and said, would you take me and show me how to do this? I said, okay. So I took some time, and I went out with them, and I just paddled around in the lake and was trying to show them some things. And they're a little bit older than me, and we're talking about their child that's graduated and is doing this stuff, and the one that's about to graduate. And I said, well, I got a 3-year-old. And the person in the kayak next to me, they kind of stopped, and they were like, how old are you? I said, well, we're 48 years old. And I know he was thinking, well, you look 25. But he said, you didn't have to laugh. You didn't have to laugh about that. And I said, I'm 48 years old. And he says, and you have a 3-year-old? And I said, yes. And I said, I have the same conversation with everybody. We went and we traded our car in for a minivan. The guy's like, why are you trading your car in for a minivan? It's a pretty nice car. Why are you trading it for a minivan? I said, well, we got a baby. He said, you've got a baby? I was thinking, it's that hard to believe that I've got a baby. I was really starting to feel bad about myself. These people are really helping with humility. And so he said, is this like an accident baby? I mean, this is what he said, really. And I said, no, we adopted. And it's a great opportunity for me to be a gospel witness and tell them about what God's done for us. But let me say something to you. Here we are at 48 years age and adopting and having a 3-year-old now. And I love every minute of this. But there were times, listen real close, there were times at the 1-year mark, the 3-year mark, the 5-year mark, the 10-year mark. And some of you that are going through this, I know it, and I'm praying that you don't ever have to go past the next few months. But I am saying that there were things in our life that we thought, the fears of the unknown, the frustrations of expectations that aren't being met, that you really feel like quitting. Now listen now, you can become so frustrated, so upset, and so sad. Listen, this is the message, that you miss the great things God's trying to do in front of you right now. You miss it. You miss it. My wife and I had to figure some of those things out. It was hard. It took time. We started trying to find, and this was really a blessing, we started finding that we need to work on our relationship with each other and loving each other and going places with each other and doing things with each other. And listen now, we could have spent our entire times frustrated over the fact that God did not give us what we wanted and never grown together and finally get a child and it'd be a miserable home. You miss the things that God's doing right in front of you when you're in fear and frustration and fightings. You're in your Troas and you're going, God, what are you doing? Only thing I'm trying to get you to get is the answer is found maybe just a short journey ahead. And I can remember there was a time that I thought, God, what in the world are you doing? Frustrated and angry. I mean, really frustrated and angry with fightings going on around me. And then these inner fears and these things and these frustrations and all of them piling up. I can remember a time in my life I could sit down and tell you about it. And getting to the point where I feel like I really want to quit. And it was just a matter of a few weekends later. I've said this so many times. It was just a few weekends later from that day. I can go back and look at what was going on in my life at that time. Just a few weekends later that I walked up to Brother Williams, and he told me about what is our baby that we've got now. Listen now, if I would have quit, I would have missed what God had for me. I'm just trying to get you to see that God had already taken care of his Macedonia. He had already taken care of it. There was nothing. He missed an opportunity while he was worried about something that there was nothing to worry about. You know, there's people in the Bible like this. You think about, and I'll just close with this thought. Ruth and Orpah, pretty miserable lives they had. If you ever read it, go back and read the book of Ruth. It's pretty short. Hey, pretty miserable, losing her husbands and all that stuff. And Naomi says, man, there's no hope. I have no home. I have no husband. I have no sons. There's nobody for you to. And they all bought into the idea that life is never going to be any good, and it's terrible. But can I tell you, just in the next chapter over, just as a short journey to get back to where they were at, in the place they came from when they got there, there's a man there, a kinsman redeemer, Boaz, that redeems them. And listen, life was better later than it ever was before. Now listen, there was two daughters. It was Ruth and it was Orpah. Orpah bought into it's never going to be any better. You never hear from her again. And Ruth said, I'm just going to stick with you. And thank God she did, because the answer was just down the road. I'm just trying to get you to see what is it you might be missing because of your fightings and fears and frustrations. Somebody said one time, what's the difference between having a really good well on your property that's springing up, Brother Buddy, that's you can furnish all your house and everything you got, a really good well, and having a really deep, dried up hole, about 6 inches. One more scoop and you would have hit water. You stop too soon, all you got is a big hole. You say, well, I was looking for a different type of message this morning. Well, I'm sorry, come back tonight. Maybe you'll get a different one. But this message is meant to help you see. I'm not trying to twist anything. I'm helping you see something that one of the greatest men in the Bible faced. And you're facing the same thing. I had a conversation with somebody this week, and they were saying, man, I've really messed some things up, and what must God think of me? And I said, well, God probably thinks you're just like everybody else in the Bible that has also had the same types of difficulties, and God got them through those things, and God will get you through this as well. So wherever you're at this morning, and whatever your walk is, let me say this. If you're not saved this morning, the first step is get saved. Trust Christ as your Savior. Start the journey with Him. And if you are saved and you're going along this journey, let me just tell you, I can relate, and you're in a church full of people that can relate. But don't miss the effectual open door that's in front of you because of all the things that are happening around you. Let's stand. Lord, do a work in the hearts of these people and help them. Father, we love you. I thank you for your word. I'm thankful. Father, if I would have been Paul and would have wrote this just as a man in the flesh, I probably would have left out all my shortcomings. But I'm thankful that this was written by men, but under the inspiration of your Spirit. And you put everything in here so that we can draw from it and help us in our own life. Now, Father, I pray you'd help us. I pray you'd help us to not get distracted with the fightings going on around us, not get distracted with the fears of the unknown, and not get frustrated. But Father, see the great things you've got in front of us: churches, families, loved ones, friends, purpose, opportunities. All these things are right before all these people, and they're missing it. And I pray that you'd help them have the eyes to see it. Father, bless now and do a work in Jesus' name. Amen. He's going to play. Give you a chance to pray this morning. If you need to pray, why don't you just find a spot? You don't have to. You say, I'm too embarrassed to come to the front. Well, just where you're at, pray. Just talk to God.